I was the divisional SHERQ manager for 11 to 12 years, almost 12 years, where I was in charge of a couple of sites, and one of the responsibilities was to ensure legal compliance with SHERQ regulations and environmental legislation. A very complex business where chemical products have been produced, still being produced, and stored, distributed, and a very complex system, and geographically wild across the country and some of the international sites as well. So the challenge was the number of pieces of legislation applicable to the operation. If there was something, it's most likely applicable to the sites, and to keep abreast with the updates, because as you well know, the legislation changes all the time, and to keep up with all the changes and up to date with all the changes, and then to roll it out to site if it's applicable, to make sure that you're compliant. Those were the challenges, the complexity and the sheer volume of changes in legislation applicable to sites. I actually did Google searches or a couple of other sites, but mostly Google searches to have access to the legislation, and then I would go and read it and phone a friend if need be to interpret it and make sure that we comply. Keeping up to date with all the changes in the legislation, the rate of change. So that is on the one side my major challenge, just to keep abreast of change and the implications thereof. Then secondly, from an organizational industry perspective, company perspective, just the number of pieces of legislation that one needs to comply with. It is mind-boggling, and then sometimes the complexity associated with that, and then duplication between different departments and different pieces of legislation. To stay compliant with reporting, for example, is becoming more and more difficult as you go along. So I think the change and the complexity and the number of pieces of legislation associated with a complex organization. And some of the pieces of legislation is really ridiculous. It's a blanket type of application, which is sometimes difficult for small businesses, for example, to comply with. High level, senior management need to understand what are the critical issues associated with legal compliance. And yes, legal compliance is not negotiable, but to a person in senior management, they just need to understand the critical stuff. I normally use the term, what 5 things do you need to understand to understand if we're legally compliant or not, or if we're okay or not in the company. And that is typically what we try to convey to senior management, to say, do you have a risk assessment in place? Because most of the legislation, 90% of it, starts with a risk assessment. If so, what did you do about it? Did you communicate it? Did you mitigate it? Did you put PPE in place? Did you tell your personnel around it? Thirdly, did you check if the people are doing the work? How are they checking that the people are adhering to what you've put in place? Were the incidents or pollution or customer complaints or whatever, and so that's the level that they need to understand. And then you add the pieces of legislation into that. You will very seldom, if you send them a piece of legislation, say this, we need to make sure that we comply with this, they will come back to you with eyes this big and say, okay, what must I do about it? What are you telling me? Now, I had a couple of such incidents. Don't send them the law. Send them implication of, listen, this change. For example, MHR regulations were due to change. We were asked for comments on that. Huge implication for the company if you're in the MHR. And even if you're not at that stage, some of you will become MHRs. They don't want to know the regulations. They need to understand, listen, for that side, this will be the implication. Because this change, we need to do X, Y, Z in addition to that, and make sure that we have X, Y, Z in place. And now we need to audit on an annual basis. That's what they need to understand. They will very seldom read the law. So the high level to operate this organization, this and that is important, and this is critical that you need. That's what you need to communicate with senior management. They just have too many things on the table. Various aspects. I could sit in my office and receive a notification that some piece of legislation has changed. With now a description of what does it mean for your site or for that operation. Is it applicable? Is it not applicable? Do I need to do something, change something? And it's in your inbox. You just need to go and read it, and then you can go and read more. That's one of the features that I love. Secondly, you have your legal register, a live legal register on your desktop. You go into Libryo, and there it is. You can show to anybody, an auditor, internal or external, that those are the applicable pieces of legislation. Later we added the SANS codes as well, which made it even more better than previously, because then you have everything in one place. You can link it to your risk register. So your risk assessment's being done, and then you link your legal requirements to your risk register. You upload your licenses, permits, your authorizations, and and everything is in one place. More importantly for me is the function that you can ask a question while you are searching. And normally when you start exploring something, they will ask you, listen, can we assist you with anything? And that is a brilliant function where you really sometimes get stuck, and especially when you're in a hurry. Say somebody asks you, how often do you need to do load testing? And it's not, it changed, but you cannot remember what to, and then you start searching and you get stuck and distracted. And that is what's lucky about Libryo as well. You can interactively talk with the team, and that provides with a quick response to your queries.